always from the heart of the city, and now on demand 24/7 on the CHFI website. This is the soundtrack to a writer of dreams, a writer whose prose reads like poetry. And I'm Don Jackson, around the world on the internet. The seller of lightning rods arrived just ahead of the storm. Somewhere not so far back, vast lightnings stomped the earth. Somewhere, a storm like a great beast with terrible teeth could not be denied. Unquote. An excerpt from Chapter 1 of Something Wicked This Way Comes by Ray Bradbury, published by Avon Books, an imprint of HarperCollins. I don't read a lot of science fiction, but I do read Ray Bradbury. But I wouldn't only want to categorize him strictly as a writer of science fiction. He is so much more than just that. His style of writing prose is almost an original form of poetry. There is a certain romance about his writing, and very definitely a romance in his soul that flows out of the words he puts to paper. This hour, Bradbury, for Lovers and Other Strangers, from iTunes and CHFI.com. David Foster with St. Elmo's Fire and Celine Dion and My Heart Will Go On. I'm Don Jackson with Lovers and Other Strangers, from iTunes and CHFI.com. The neighbor, Jim, is asking the seller of lightning rods why there are so many ancient symbols on his iron rods. And again I quote, "Why the Egyptian, Arabic, Abyssinian, Choctaw? Well, what tongue does the wind talk? What nationality is a storm? What country do rains come from? What color is lightning? Where does thunder go when it dies?" Boys, you gotta be ready in every dialect with every shape and form to hex the St. Elmo's fires, the balls of blue light that prowl the earth like sizzling cats. I got the only lightning rods in the world that hear, feel, know, and sass back any storm, no matter what tongue, voice, or sign. No foreign thunder so loud, this rod can't soft-talk it. Unquote. An excerpt from Chapter 1 of Something Wicked This Way Comes by Ray Bradbury. I remember watching him on one of his TV specials. He was in his office explaining where the inspiration comes from. It was one of the most unusual environments. He was surrounded on all sides by all manner of bric-a-brac, figurines, books, souvenirs, all with a story to tell, all for inspiration. To be inspired, all he had to do was to pick up an object, or even just survey his surroundings. Sometimes you see a kite so high, so wise, it almost knows the wind. It travels, then chooses to land in one spot and no other. And no matter how you yank, run this way or that, it will simply break its cord, seek its resting place, and bring you, blood-mouthed, running. Unquote. I've flown many kites, like the one Ray Bradbury just described. This hour, a tribute to one of the great writers of this or any generation. Ray Bradbury. For Lovers and Other Strangers. From iTunes and CHFI.com. Jann Arden with A Thing for You, and Elton John's Rocket Man flying even higher than a kite. I'm Don Jackson with Lovers and Other Strangers from iTunes and CHFI.com. The same problems that plagued humankind on Earth seem to follow some of his characters to planets like Mars. Bradbury wrote so many stories in the science fiction genre that had a kernel of scientific truth at the heart of each one. In a Bradbury story called The Smile, set in a post-apocalyptic world, a world that has very little respect for the artistic accomplishments of past civilizations, the story has a magnificent work of art, a painting by a master from centuries past, attacked by an unruly mob. The young boy gets involved, but for another purpose than to destroy. He doesn't approve of society's desire to erase any evidence of the artistic past. It reminds me of the fireman who burned books in another one of his classic tales. He comes away with a special treasure and leaves the scene quickly. He travels back to the barn where he and his family live. And later that night, when the family is fast asleep, he brings out the little bit of canvas that he was able to save and looks at the Mona Lisa's smile in the moonlight. Lovers and Other Strangers from iTunes and CHFI.com. Jordin Sparks and Tattoo. Of course, he wrote a very famous short story called The Illustrated Man. It's a classic and pretty frightening about a tattooed carnival worker. Don McLean and another great painter, Vincent van Gogh, and David Gateson bred with the song If. And I'm Don Jackson with Lovers and Other Strangers from iTunes and CHFI.com. According to Merriam-Webster's Encyclopedia of Literature, and I quote, best known for highly imaginative science fiction stories and novels that blend social criticism with an awareness of the hazards of runaway technology. Unquote. Our technology certainly hasn't evolved to the point that Bradbury envisions, but it's pretty close. He warned us of things that people never dreamed possible, and those warnings have in many instances come true. I worry more about those who are in control of the technology and who in the process abuse it. Technology wasn't the only thing Bradbury feared. He feared fire. To be exact, a fire of 451 degrees Fahrenheit. Lovers and Other Strangers from iTunes and CHFI.com. John Lennon and Imagine, and Sarah McLachlan with World on Fire. I'm Don Jackson with Lovers and Other Strangers from iTunes and CHFI.com. There are those days which seem a taking in of breath which held, suspends the whole earth in its waiting. Some summers refuse to end. So along the road those flowers spread that, when touched, give down a shower of autumn rust. Look, Doug, said Grandpa. See those flowers? Yes, sir. Farewell, summer, Doug. That's the name of those flowers. Feel the air. August, come back. Farewell, summer. Unquote, an excerpt from Farewell, Summer by Ray Bradbury. As it said in the May 07 issue of the QPB Book Review, and I quote, in 1957, Ray Bradbury penned his most deeply personal work, Dandelion Wine, a tale about a bygone golden era and a place called Greentown, Illinois. There, 12-year-old Douglas Spaulding discovers all that is, or seems, eternal about boyhood and summertime. Now, 50 years later, this authentic original revisits the mythical world of Greentown in a wonderful rejoinder to Douglas's yearning for youthful immortality. It's October and fall is in the air. But Douglas, his brother Tom, and their friends are desperate to hold on to the last warm days of summer, and they're willing to wage a war to do it. Theirs is a battle against time, against growing up, and against crusty old town elder Calvin C. Quartermain, who's intent on teaching them a thing or two about life. The boys believe that if they stop the clock atop the courthouse building, they can stave off the sands of time and hold on to their cherished youth. Yet life awaits in ambush to assail Doug Spaulding with its powerful mysteries. From the irresistible ascent of manhood to the sweet surrender to a first kiss. Wistful, hilarious, evocative, and profound. Farewell Summer is proof positive that the flame of wonder still burns brightly within Bradbury's irrepressible imagination. Unquote. I like that review. So true about that book. Bradbury wrote, an autumn leaf very crisp fell somewhere in the dark. But it was only the page of a book turning. Unquote. Believe it or not, the leaves are already falling from a few trees in my neighborhood. Lovers and Other Strangers, from iTunes and CHFI.com. Sting and Fragile, and Van Morrison's Moondance. I'm Don Jackson with Lovers and Other Strangers from iTunes and CHFI.com. Here's another one of my favorite excerpts from his many writings. Ray Bradbury in California wrote, half the fun of travel is the aesthetic of lostness. Not being able to put Piccadilly together with Regent Street to distant Charing Cross. That is deliciousness. To go down the Spanish Steps in Rome and vanish. To go out in Paris midnight crowds and wonder why you love it so, as texture after texture drifts by, and you wish you could walk forever. Unquote. His is a body of work that is timeless, prose that reads like poetry, a talent for storytelling that keeps the reader up late into the night. He reminds us to be careful with our future. And, in a sense, some of his thoughts about the future of humankind have already come true. Always compelling reading. Finally, this hour, one very good piece of advice. And it has nothing to do with make-believe worlds. In fact, it has very much to do with the real world. Ray Bradbury said, and I quote, if we listened to our intellect, We'd never have a love affair. We'd never have a friendship. We'd never go into business because we'd be cynical. Well, that's nonsense. You've got to jump off cliffs all the time and build your wings on the way down. Unquote. Ray Bradbury, born August 22nd, 1920, in Waukegan, Illinois. I'm Don Jackson from iTunes and CHFI.com. I hope you will tell all your friends about Lovers and Other Strangers from iTunes and CHFI.com. Good night, sweet dreams. I'm Don Jackson.